in the country. It can be replicated also in South Sudan with the rift between Salva Kiir and Riek Machar, as it were. And even during the funeral of the late President Mwai Kibaki, we saw Salva Kiir was here in the country, and maybe you can tell us, he actually didn't speak. We saw the state minister giving a speech on his behalf. So we were a bit consternated by the fact that is he ailing, what is happening with President Salva Kiir so far. And this is not the first time that we've seen that people are making speeches on his behalf. So it's sort of a niggling worry that you can clarify if you're privy to any information that we don't really know. But can you speak also to this rift that we have here in the country with the Deputy President and the President, and how also that is panning out with Salva Kiir and Riek Machar?
Of course, Dubal, we were all shocked that President Kiir traveled from Juba to Nairobi for the sole purpose of eulogizing President Kibaki and addressing the funeral gathering, only for him to be present in the audience and not address. And I asked around the sources. It seems like there are two main problems, Dubal. First is that President Salva is someone who is not very articulate. Last time he was in Kenya and he was giving an address, he ended up saying really terrible things, addressing the deputy president as mad, and saying a lot of things that almost caused a diplomatic row. So he's someone very, in Juba he can blah blah and talk he wants. He's there, he's a dictator, and no one dared to oppose him. But in Kenya, that was a different why he could not address. As mentioned, it was that he had like a throat problem. He had a throat issue. And this issue was not caused because he had been singing. It was because the night before, our president had consumed quite an enormous amount of alcohol. And when he woke up the next day, he had a terrible hangover. And he is ailing, there's no doubt about it. His knees are killing him. And with the hangover, he had a terrible headache. You couldn't possibly walk up and stand, leave alone to think about what to say in addressing a person like Kibaki and with that gathering. And this is a pattern that we have observed Dubal for quite some time. I witnessed this for the first time in Washington, D.C. In 2012, when he came for a meeting with President Obama. The same thing happened the night before. He drank a lot of whiskey, and then the next morning he couldn't wake up on time. And then by the time he got to the meeting, he was quite late. He lost his mind about what he wanted to say, and the meeting ended up being a disaster. It was the last time that he had a substantive meeting with an American president. And then during the same trip in New York, he had another terrible hangover to the extent that he walked out of the UN headquarters, got lost on the street of New York, walking with his hat on the street, people taking pictures of him. It was extremely embarrassing for the people of South Sudan. And then finally in 2014, in Malabo, Equatorial Guinea, he traveled for the purpose of attending African Union Summit, only to be confined to the hotel for 3 days. 3 days, Dubal, consuming alcohol. So the president was terribly incapacitated, is no longer really functional, unable to discharge of his duties because of this enormous character flaw. And again, with the issue that Dr. Kanenja raised, you have a president that is unable to fulfill his duties. You have a deputy that is eyeing his seat and want to take it over by military power, both of whom are polarizing figures who are unable to take South Sudan forward. So it's terrible. In fact, we wish that we had a cabinet, because what is happening with Kiir, if you remember, my friend, there was Yeltsin in Russia. He had that terrible trip where he could not get out of the plane to meet with the president of Ireland because he had drank too much vodka. But at least in Russia, they managed to get him to exit. Here in South Sudan, we are stuck. We have a president that cannot discharge. And it goes again with the point we mentioned before about selecting a deputy and also selecting leadership. You look at the qualities of a leader. There is the respect for the institution of the presidency. All of us, we do our things. We consume, we do those things. But when you are a president representing a country, it comes with enormous weight. And it's unfortunate that our president cannot provide dignity to the office that he occupies. It's very sad for the people of South Sudan, and we hope that there is a way that we can get rid of this shame and be able to project an image that is more attuned to our image as a people.
Well, it sounds to me that he may be needing a rehabilitation. So the state of South Sudan should consider rehabilitating Salva Kiir if he is alcoholic.
Yes, and it's a pattern that has gone on for quite some time. And to a certain extent, we can't really blame him. During the war, this was really the behavior of many commanders. Many of them were basically alcoholic. They used to drink. This is the equivalent of the Ugandan warige. This is the terrible alcohol, the one that can sometimes even make you blind. This is what they used to consume during the war. And this behavior has continued after the independence. And with our president, has become a habit. It has also become a way of managing him, Jabal, by some of the people that surround him. They bring alcohol to him. They will get him drunk. When he's completely drunk, they will bring him degrees to sign. And like days later, he will be wondering, where is Mr. X and Mr. X? And then the people will say, hey, you fire him the other day on the presidential through a presidential degree. And then he will say, when did I do that? And because when he signed that degree, he was completely incapacitated. So we have a country that is being run by a criminal clique that surrounded the president and that is using his weakness, this weakness of alcohol, to manage him. Very sad.
Very sad indeed. Very sad indeed. Ahmed Ash, you want to comment on that?
Yes, I want to tell Mr. Peter Ajak.
I think it's Dr. Kanenjo before we come. Dr. Kanenjo, we'll come to you.
Okay.
You see, if you're not allowed to drive while you're drunk, you should not be allowed to drive the country while you're drunk. And this is much so when it comes to our continent. I think we've made a lot of mistakes when we're intoxicated. But this is not just limited to actually the presidents, of this continent. This is something that is very familiar with a lot of our diplomats and a lot of our representatives whenever they go out there to serve the country in meetings and stuff like that. Rarely do they even show up at the United Nations or whatever conferences they are. They'll be so intoxicated by the following day or by the end of the week they've actually learned nothing, so they bring back to the country nothing. Now, that means we should actually have a lot more discipline, going forward. However, going then back to what we were discussing,